Welcome back to the MOOC course on corporate social responsibility. My name is Aradhana Malik and I'm helping you with this course. And in this lecture, we will wind up the discussion on corporate governance and corporate social responsibility. Now, we were discussing about how these two relate. Now, in this lecture, we are going to talk about, or we are going to discuss some models that connect corporate governance to corporate social responsibility. So let's see what we have for you here. The first model that I want to share with you is from a paper by Arora and Dharwadkar, and so in this paper they talk about the satisfaction with firm performance as a moderator in the relationship between corporate governance and corporate social responsibility. And firm performance is again related to corporate governance, as we'll see in another model. But here I wanted to show you. So corporate governance consists of managerial ownership, independent directors, institutional ownership, shareholder rights. Now this in turn leads to positive CSR, could lead to negative CSR also. I'll just tell you what negative CSR is. Now this in turn is influenced with the satisfaction with firm performance, and satisfaction with firm performance would have two primary elements that have been discussed in this paper. The first is the slack, the existence of a cushion of actual or potential resources, and the attainment discrepancy, the difference between actual and aspired performance. What we thought we could do and what we actually did is the attainment discrepancy. Where were we going, and you know how much, and how much of a cushion do we have to counter, or how much of a cushion of resources we have to fall back on if we don't achieve our goal, or in our pursuit of the goal, is called slack. Now these in turn, these relate to satisfaction of with the firm performance, and that in turn feeds into the efforts of the organization towards corporate social responsibility. Now the way this would happen is as follows. If there is higher slack, and I'll just discuss that in the next slide how this happens. Positive and negative CSR, let me elaborate a little bit on that. Positive CSR is CSR in the truest sense. You carry out some activities for the benefit of the environment, and they actually end up benefiting the environment. Negative CSR is that we indulge in CSR only because we have to, or we don't take care of the quality of the activities that we are carrying out and the fruits of our labor when we are carrying out CSR activities. So we try to do good, but it ends up harming the environment more. For example, in a drought-stricken area, we provide water in sealed plastic bottles. Now in a drought-stricken area, possibly, yes, it's nice to give people water in plastic bottles, it's hygienic, but then we all use sealed plastic bottles, but then at the same time with such a large group of people, we end up littering the environment much more. So we help the people on one hand but damage the environment on the other. So we give them food packets in non-biodegradable packets. The packets are made of non-biodegradable material. So water is still okay, but the food could be packaged in biodegradable material and wrapped up in cloth that they could wrap around themselves, if they felt cold. So, making a little what we call in Hindi as potlis. I'm sorry to be using Hindi here, but then little bundles of cloth that are tied together. So that might be more environment friendly than giving food in, say, polythene bags, individually wrapped polythene packets. I mean, that is such a big menace to the environment. We have all kinds. Recently I was reading about one of our Indian states banning plastic bags. Of course, these have been banned in my home state for a long time, but I read that the plastic bags have been banned, and anyone found in possession of a polythene bag could be fined up to 5,000 rupees. Now that was a shock. Okay, fine, yes, you're carrying a plastic bag, very nice move to protect the environment, but what about people having these packets of chips and biscuits and water bottles, and those are the real litterers. These are the real littering things. So when we are handing out things, I'm talking about that. I'm just giving you examples of negative CSR. We give people things, or you give them clothes that are not that are not wearable, or you do things for them that may help them or that may not even help them. So with the intention of helping them, you do things, but in the end you end up hurting somebody else, or you end up not being able to help people who are given these things. So that is called negative CSR. Okay, now according to this paper, what happens here is that if the satisfaction with firm performance is low, which means low slack, negative attainment discrepancy, but the corporate governance is strong, that will result in low positive CSR and low negative CSR. Then if the satisfaction with firm performance is high, which means high slack, high cushion of resources, positive attainment discrepancy, then which means that the difference between what we set out to achieve and what we could actually achieve is very little, and or if we achieve more than we set out to achieve, then in the end we have a strong form of corporate governance. Then the CSR activities, the targeted CSR activities are positive, and there is low negative CSR. On the other hand, if there is low slack and negative attainment discrepancy, which means that the difference between what we set out to achieve, we are not able to achieve as much as we set out to achieve. So in that case, and weak corporate governance would result in low positive CSR and high negative CSR. We are doing CSR just for the heck of it. We don't really want to do it because we are not, and that of course becomes a function of the involvement of the people indulging in CSR activities also. On the other hand, if the satisfaction with firm performance is high, which means high slack, a reasonably significant cushion of resources to fall back on, and there is positive attainment discrepancy, you've achieved more than you set out to achieve, then even if the corporate governance is weak, you will achieve high positive CSR, and the negative CSR will be low. It won't be totally zero, but it could be low. So this is what this study found out. Now I would like to share with you the results of another study that was conducted by Gul Mohammed and Rashid and published in 2017. What they did was they took a whole lot of literature and looked for examples of CSR activities and their relationship with corporate governance. The limitation here was that they were able to find out about CSR activities only through CSR disclosure. So CSR disclosure is actually a very credible form of information as regards CSR activities. So that is why the word CSR disclosure is mentioned here. Knowing one thing is knowing that something is happening is one thing. A documentation of it is another ball game. And they have looked at the documentation of CSR in various organizations, and they have their literature review talks in detail about which papers find what kind of a relationship with between CSR and corporate governance, and I thought this would be very relevant, so I shared the details of their literature review with you. Now I'll give you a full reference to this paper and you can read the paper. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so in a paper by Joe and Hari Joto that was published in 2011, Gul Mohammed and Rashid found that this paper talked about the direct positive influence of board leadership and independence analyst following institutional ownership and anti-takeover provisions on CSR engagement. So these boards, the organizations that had good board leadership, independent board of directors or independent directors on their board, analyst following, they had institutional ownership, they had provisions to prevent takeovers. They were engaging in CSR more. Another study that they talk about was by Khan et al., Khan and Associates, published in 2012, and this study showed that foreign and public ownership, presence of audit committees and board independence had significant positive effect on CSR disclosures. Then the same paper also found, as reported by Gul Mohammed and Rashid, that the dominance of family ownership on CSR disclosure was alleviated to some extent by sound CSR mechanisms. So if you had CSR mechanisms, the family ownership on CSR disclosure became the effects of dominance on CSR were neutralized to some extent. Then boards with independent directors. This was from a paper by Ghazali, which was published in 2012. Gul Mohammed and Rashid reported that this paper found that the boards with independent directors were less involved in CSR activities. In the previous paper they said, so they found both things. So I'm just sharing this with you, possibly implying that for independent directors it should be directs. Again, I will fix that right here. For independent directors, CSR engagement was not a primary concern, but where they engaged, CSR reporting became better. Yeah. Okay, so this should be directors here. All right. Then they also, the same paper also found, and this paper was talked about a study conducted in Malaysia. This paper found that CSR disclosure was significantly higher in firms that were larger in size and had higher government ownership, with reference to Malaysian organizations. So I put with reference to Malaysia so you would get an idea of the context in which they are talking about. We'll see a similar example in the following slides. Then the same paper also found that that higher proportion of management ownership and CSR disclosure was negatively correlated, implying that if the management owned the organization, the CSR disclosure was likely to be lower, as opposed to having an independent board of directors controlling the CSR disclosure. Okay. Then Gul Mohammed and Rashid suggested or talked about another paper, reported the findings of another paper that found that only the presence of audit committees, ownership concentration and government ownership significantly positively impacted the extent of CSR disclosures. In another paper, Gul Mohammed and Rashid reported another paper that talked about profitability, board commitment to CSR and firm size positively affecting the extent of CSR disclosure. Then another paper that they reported was by Rees and Rodionova, that was published in 2015. They found that ESG, environmental, social and governance performance, is negatively affected by closely held equity and family ownership. So we saw that in another slide also. So family ownership did not really bear well with CSR disclosure. Okay. Or CSR. Another paper that they cited was by Malin and Michelon, that was published in 2011, and this paper talked about corporate social performance being positively related to the proportions of independent, community, influential and female directors. So women were found to be, and I take a lot of pride in saying that women were found to be, if women were in the positions of power, they were found to be reporting CSR disclosure better. So there you go. Okay, all right. State ownership, another paper by Lau and Associates, published in 2016, reported that state ownership positively affected CSR performance, and this was with reference to a study conducted in China on Chinese companies. So Now this is relevant. I've put in the names of the countries where these studies were conducted, so you know about the context in which these things could be happening. Things could be different in other countries. Okay. Then another paper that was reported was by GZ and Associates, published in 2014, and that paper found that audit committee characteristics, size and risk, and board meeting frequency, both size and independence of the board, positively affected disclosure of the CSR activities. So another paper by Liu and Zhang that was published in 2017, as reported by Gul Mohammed and Rashid, found that supervisory board meetings, state ownership, number of directors and managerial shareholding positively affected CSR. Now, the same paper also found that CSR information was not beneficial for the short-term profit of an organization, but could potentially increase its long-term value, and the reason for this could be the reputation of the organization, could be the credibility, could be the trust that people placed in the organization. And lastly, there was a paper by Manasakis and Associates that was published in 2014 and reported by Gul Mohammed and Rashid in their paper published in 2017, and this proposed that hiring individually socially responsible CEO acted as a commitment device for the firm's owners and signaled to consumers that the missioned CSR activities would be undertaken, which meant that a person at the helm of affairs, if the CEO was personally on an individual level committed to corporate social responsibility, the message would spread to the board of directors. It would also percolate down to the rest of the management, and the company as a whole could then really genuinely say that they could start working on CSR activities. They were found to be working on CSR activities genuinely. It was not just reporting, it was actual work. So the missioned CSR actually became the real CSR of the organizations. So based on all the above, Gul Mohammed and Rashid then summarized their findings in the form of a model that they published in their paper, and this is the model, and this model talks about how it was a summary of the above findings. They took the literature review and then they summarized the findings, and then they said that overall board composition, transparency and auditing disclosure fed into the corporate governance index, a measurement of how well the corporate governance was happening in different organizations, and that in turn influenced the CSR activities and disclosure, and that was in turn a function of the agency theory, legitimacy theory and stakeholder theory. So we've related this in the past, so I won't go into those details. Another model that I would like to share with you now, this model in the paper is in the form of a proper model, but what I've done here is I've taken the findings, one, because it was very difficult to put the whole model here in a readable format, and two, this will be much easier to understand if I just put it in the form of a point by point slides. So I've shared this with you, so please bear with me. I'll give you the full reference to the paper and then you can see it. You can read it on your own. Now this paper talked about various things here. So this was a paper by Mason and Simmons, it's been referred to earlier also, and they talked about a stakeholder systems model of CSR and embedding CSR in the stakeholder systems model, and embedding corporate governance in the stakeholder systems model of CSR. Now what they said was that stakeholder claims and agendas included shareholders and institutional investors, customers, employees, suppliers, government regulations and auditors, local and national communities, social and environmental activists. Now these claims and agendas were influenced by CSR outcomes and reporting, which we'll come to a little later, stakeholder perceptions of distributive justice, and the cumulative company evaluation of CSR. And in turn, these claims and agendas influenced board decisions on stakeholder saliency, the importance and the power, the strength of stakeholders. Now, board decisions on stakeholder saliency in turn influence investor and company expectations, which includes revenue increases, cost reduction, increased brand value, great customer and employee attraction and retention, enhanced corporate image, customer and supplier expectations, which includes functional, emotion and social benefits of CSR infused products, services and supply chains, employee expectations, which includes fulfilling work, job security and involvement in decision making commensurate to and competitive reward, equitable treatment and development opportunities, community and environment expectations, which include commitment to industry, national and international standards, comprehensive and timely disclosure, sustainable resource utilization, voice, consideration of the social and natural environment, which in turn influence the company philosophy and strategy for CSR and stakeholder perceptions of procedural justice, and in turn are influenced again by these three: CSR outcomes and reporting, stakeholder perceptions of distributive justice, and the cumulative company evaluation of CSR. So this is also influenced by the other three. Then CSR company philosophy and strategy and stakeholder perceptions of procedural justice in turn influence the hardwiring of the organization, the systems, and that includes investor relations, the CSR processes and operations, customer relations and employee relations, soft wiring, culture of the organization, and community relations, which in turn influence the stakeholder perceptions of interactional justice. Stakeholder perceptions of interactional justice, I'm sorry for the clutter here, but I wanted to get everything down on one slide. It would make much more sense here. So stakeholder perceptions of interactional justice. Justice now, again, when we talk about interactional justice, we are talking about a sense of fairness. How do we perceive that something is fair? We compare ourselves to people within the organization, people outside the organization, people in the same situation as us, and people who are just out there, neither in the same organization nor in the same position as us. So when we talk about justice, we are not talking about something that is right or wrong. We are talking about the fairness, the sense of fairness that we have as far as some activity is concerned. Now when we talk about interactional justice, we are talking about a sense of fairness in our dealings with the organization, in our interactions with the organization. So stakeholder perceptions of interactional justice. Do the stakeholders feel that they have been treated fairly, they are being communicated with fairly or not? And that is what this is. This influences the CSR outcomes and reporting, which includes investor evaluation, which in turn includes cost benefit assessment, appropriate return on investment. ROI stands for return on investments, greater innovation, increased customer revenue, loyalty and advocacy, reputational benefits, vicarious evaluation of the organization's wider CSR practices. Customer and supplier evaluation, which includes functional, emotional and social benefits of CSR manifested, fair trade principles observed, sustainable production, service provision and supply chains, vicarious evaluation of the organization's wider CSR practice again. Employee evaluation includes ethical people management, employees recognized as key sources of competitive advantage in employees resourcing, development and reward strategies, involvement in decision making, and again vicarious evaluation of the organization's wider CSR practices. Community and environmental evaluation, which includes demonstrable alignment with industry, national and international standards, timely auditing and comprehensive disclosure, verifiable sustainability, and being viewed as a good neighbor. And this in turn influences stakeholder perceptions of distributive justice. Now stakeholder perceptions of interactional justice would be, is the company telling us the right thing? When we talk about distributive justice, we are talking about getting things, distribution of the spoils, distribution of the surplus, as we talked about in the previous class. So share stakeholder perceptions of distributive justice, which means, do the stakeholders feel that they are being treated fairly in terms of getting what they want out of the company? And this in turn influences stakeholder claims and agendas, board decisions on stakeholder saliency, investor and company expectations. These are the things that we've discussed earlier. Customer and supplier expectations, employee expectations, and community and environmental expectations. And it in turn, and CSR and company evaluation. So they also influence CSR and company evaluation. Now, what does cumulative company evaluation of CSR influences stakeholder claims and agendas? It influences board decisions on stakeholder saliency. It influences investor and company expectations, customer and supplier expectations, employee expectations, and community and environment expectations. And it includes the following. It includes the following. So the first one is efficiency. Cumulative company evaluation includes efficiency, which means incorporation of CSR principles and standards in management control systems and performance management systems. Effectiveness, overall qualitative and quantitative cost benefit analysis of CSR within an appropriate time frame. Have things been done the way they were supposed to be done? How much money has been spent on CSR activities? Is it more? Is it less? Equity, CSR stakeholder perceptions of appropriate power, scope, and justice. Environmental impact, demonstration of sustainability in resource acquisition and utilization, and external reputation. So, external reputation refers to the alignment with relevant standards and enhancement of ethical capital across stakeholder groups. Now, this is what really happens here. Now, I wanted to share, but I think I'll just respond to your queries about how corporate governance happens in India. We can't have a separate lecture on that. But then this is the connection between corporate governance and corporate social responsibility, and I think this model sums it up really well, and I will give you the complete reference so you can read the paper, and it's a beautifully written paper that just brings everything together that we've discussed till now. So this wraps up the discussion on corporate governance and corporate social responsibility. Now I have another piece of homework for you. I like giving you homework, and I like reading your discussions on the forum. And your homework is to go through whatever we have discussed and see and find examples, and maybe find even more literature or on how corporate governance good for organizations or not? If yes, which form of corporate governance would be applicable in which setting? This is something I asked you to do earlier also. And also find out, which aspects of corporate governance which would contribute positively to actual performance of corporate social responsibility activities, to actual socially responsible behavior by organizations. Let's see what you can find. I have found some material, but it's a group of more than 2,000 students listening to these lectures. So the intellectual capital out there is much higher, and you're all doing this because you're interested. I assume you're interested in the course. So let's see what you come up with. Please put your examples on the forum, and we can all benefit from your discussions, and those can be incorporated into future runs of this course, of course with due credit to the people who found those examples. So I hope you've enjoyed this lecture, and we will continue with some more discussion on corporate social responsibility in the next module, in the next week, and in the next class. So thank you very much for listening.